Have you ever found out that someone close to you has been lying to your face? That gut-wrenching moment when you realize they've been taking advantage of your trust? That's exactly what happened to me last year when I discovered my brother-in-law Jake had been secretly siphoning money from my personal account. But instead of exploding with anger like most people would, I made a decision that changed both our lives forever. What I didn't expect was how this whole mess would end up revealing something about my own family that I never saw coming. My name is Michael, and until last year I thought I had the perfect family set up. My wife Sarah and I have been married for 12 years. We have twin daughters, Emma and Olivia, who are 10 years old and absolutely the light of our lives. We live in a modest house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but it's comfortable, and it's ours. Sarah has one younger brother, Jake. He's 32, 4 years younger than us, and has always been the creative one in the family. While Sarah and I chose stable careers, she's a nurse and I work in IT, Jake bounced between jobs, always chasing some new passion or project. Don't get me wrong, Jake isn't lazy. He works hard, but he's always been searching for that big break. He's charming, funny, and the girls adore their uncle. He has dinner with us at least once a week and often babysits when Sarah and I need a night out. Jake lives in a small apartment across town. He doesn't have much money, which is why Sarah and I have helped him out from time to time. Nothing major, covering his rent when he was between jobs, lending him money for car repairs, that sort of thing. Family helps family, right? Or at least that's what I thought until that fateful day in September when I noticed something strange in my bank account. It was a regular Tuesday evening. Sarah was working a night shift at the hospital and I was going through our monthly budget while the girls were doing homework in their room. I logged into my personal savings account, the one I use to save for family vacations and emergency expenses, and something caught my eye. There were several withdrawals, about $200 each, that I didn't recognize. At first I thought it might be a banking error or maybe even identity theft. My heart raced as I scrolled through the transactions. They'd been happening for nearly 3 months, always on Friday afternoons. I checked my calendar and realized something. These withdrawals happened on days when Jake had picked up the girls from school and brought them to our house. I felt sick to my stomach. Jake had a key to our house for emergencies. He must have found my emergency card that I keep in my desk drawer. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Jake, my trusted brother-in-law, had been stealing from me. The total amount added up to nearly $2,400. Not enough to bankrupt us, but definitely not pocket change either. That was money I had been saving for our family vacation to Disney World that winter. My first instinct was to call Sarah, but I stopped myself. She idolizes her little brother. This would crush her. I needed to be sure before I said anything, so I decided to confront Jake directly. I invited Jake over for lunch the next day, just the two of us. I remember how nervous I felt waiting for him to arrive, rehearsing what I would say, wondering how he would react. Would he deny it? Would he break down and confess? Would this destroy our family? When Jake arrived, he was his usual cheerful self, completely unaware of what was coming. We made small talk as I grilled some burgers, and finally, when we sat down to eat, I took a deep breath and placed my phone on the table between us, showing the bank statement. "Jake, I need you to explain these withdrawals," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger and disappointment churning inside me. The change in his expression was immediate. His smile vanished and his face turned pale. He stared at the phone, then at me, then back at the phone. For a moment I thought he might try to lie, but then his shoulders slumped, and he put his burger down, untouched. "I'm so sorry, Mike," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was going to pay it all back. I swear I was." "Why did you do it, Jake?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. "If you needed money, you could have just asked. We've helped you before." Jake covered his face with his hands. When he looked up, I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. "I couldn't ask for this," he said. "Not after all the times you've already helped me. And it's not what you think." What Jake told me next completely changed my perspective. He hadn't spent the money on gambling or partying or any of the scenarios I had imagined. Instead, he had been using it to rent a small workshop space where he was developing prototypes for an invention he'd been working on for years. Jake had always been good with his hands and had a natural talent for fixing things. His invention was a specialized tool for electricians that made certain wiring jobs safer and more efficient. He explained that he'd come up with the idea while working as an apprentice electrician 3 years ago, but never had the resources to develop it properly. "I've applied for small business loans, grants, everything," Jake explained, his words tumbling out now. "But without a prototype to show, no one would take a chance on me. I needed the workshop space and materials. I know it was wrong to take your money, Mike. I was desperate, and I convinced myself it was just a temporary loan. As Jake spoke, I found my anger slowly giving way to curiosity. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos of his workshop and the prototype he was developing. I'm no electrician, but even I could see that his idea was innovative. The thing is, Jake continued, wiping his eyes, it's working. The prototype is almost finished, and I've already spoken to a few electricians who've tested earlier versions. They say it could be a game changer for the industry. I sat back in my chair trying to process everything. On one hand, Jake had still stolen from me. On the other hand, he wasn't using the money for something frivolous. He was pursuing a dream, trying to build something meaningful. Why didn't you just tell us about this? I asked. Why all the secrecy? Jake's expression darkened. Do you remember what happened the last time I told everyone about my big idea? I did remember. 3 years ago, Jake had excitedly announced at a family dinner that he was going to start his own home repair business. Sarah's parents had immediately criticized him, calling it another one of his pipe dreams and telling him to get a real job. Even Sarah, though more supportive, had expressed doubts. Jake had abandoned the idea within weeks. I couldn't face that again, Jake said quietly. I needed to prove it could work first. I was going to surprise everyone once I had something real to show. I sent Jake home that day without making any decisions. I told him I needed time to think and that we would talk again soon. He left, shoulders hunched, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. That night after the girls were in bed, I told Sarah everything. At first she was furious with her brother, but as I explained his project and showed her the photos he'd sent me, her anger gradually transformed into something more complex. He's always been like this, she said softly. Full of big dreams, but afraid of failure. Remember how good he was at building things when we were kids? Dad always said he should put those skills to use, but whenever Jake tried something, it never seemed to work out. We stayed up late into the night discussing what to do. The easy option would be to demand Jake repay the money and cut him off. But something about his project had caught my attention. What if his invention really was as good as he believed? By morning, I'd made up my mind. Instead of pulling away from Jake, I was going to do something completely unexpected. I was going to invest in his dream. The next day I visited Jake's workshop for myself. It was a tiny space in an old industrial building, cramped and not particularly clean, but I could see he had made the most of it. Tools were organized neatly, and in the center of the room sat his prototype. Jake walked me through how it worked, and even with my limited knowledge, I could see the potential. He had created detailed drawings, conducted research on the market, and even started drafting a patent application using online resources. How much would you need to take this to the next level? I asked him. Jake looked at me in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, if you had proper funding, what would it take to turn this into a real business? Jake blinked rapidly, clearly caught off guard. Are you serious, Mike? Dead serious, I replied. But this time we do it properly. No more taking money without asking. We spent the next 2 hours discussing numbers. Jake needed about $15,000 to finish the prototype, secure a patent, and manufacture a small initial batch to test in the market. It was a significant amount of money, most of my savings, but I could see the potential return if his invention took off. I can't ask you to do this, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Not after what I did. You're not asking, I told him firmly. I'm offering, but there are conditions. My conditions were straightforward. We would draw up a proper contract. I would own 30% of the business. Jake would repay the money he had taken, either from profits or from his regular paycheck if the business failed, and most importantly, he would never lie to family again. Jake agreed immediately, his eyes bright with a mixture of hope and disbelief. We shook hands, and just like that, I became an investor in my brother-in-law's dream. Building the business. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of activity. Jake quit his part-time job to focus entirely on the invention, which he named the Circuit Safe. I helped him find a patent attorney who worked with startups and could offer reasonable rates. We set up a proper business plan and created a timeline for development and launch. Every weekend, I would spend a few hours at the workshop, helping where I could and learning about the electrical industry. Jake was in his element, working tirelessly to perfect his design. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed truly focused and determined. Sarah, after getting over her initial shock at my decision, became our biggest cheerleader. She helped set up a simple website and used her connections at the hospital to introduce Jake to the facility manager, who became interested in the Circuit Safe for their maintenance team. Even the girls got involved, helping to paint the workshop and bringing Jake lunch on Saturdays. It became a family project, something we all believed in together. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. We hit several technical roadblocks with the design. The first manufacturer we found produced a batch with significant defects. Marketing proved more challenging than we expected, with many potential customers skeptical of a new product from an unknown company. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Had I thrown away our savings on another one of Jake's dreams? Would this end in disappointment like so many of his previous ventures? After months of hard work, sleepless nights, and overcoming countless obstacles, we were finally ready to launch the circuit safe. Jake had secured orders from 3 local electrical contractors and the hospital's maintenance department. It wasn't huge, but it was a start. We held a small launch party at Jake's workshop, now transformed into a proper office space. Sarah's parents came, still skeptical but willing to support their son. A few friends and potential clients joined us as well. Jake gave a demonstration of the circuit safe, showing how it saved time and improved safety for electricians. I watched the faces of the professionals in the room and saw their expressions change from polite interest to genuine appreciation as they understood the value of what Jake had created. By the end of the evening, we had 3 more orders and several promising leads. It wasn't enough to make us rich, but it was validation that we were on the right track. As we cleaned up after the party, Jake pulled me aside. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You had every right to be furious with me, to cut me off completely. Instead, you believed in me when no one else would." "That's not entirely true," I told him. "You believed in yourself enough to take a risk. I just helped you do it the right way." We hugged, and in that moment, I felt that regardless of whether the business succeeded or failed, we had already gained something valuable. Jake had found his purpose, and our family had grown stronger through the process. Remember how I mentioned an unexpected twist? Well, here it comes. About a month after our launch, I received a call from a lawyer representing a major tool manufacturing company. My first thought was that we were being accused of patent infringement, and my stomach dropped. But the reality was quite different. The company had heard about the circuit safe from one of the contractors who had purchased it. They were interested in discussing a potential acquisition of our patent and business. Jake and I met with their representatives the following week. They offered us $200,000 for the patent and design, plus a 5% royalty on all future sales. They would handle manufacturing, distribution, and marketing while keeping Jake on as a consultant to help develop future versions and related products. It was more money than either of us had imagined possible at this early stage. We asked for time to consider the offer and spent the next few days weighing our options. We could keep building the business ourselves, which would mean more risk, but potentially more reward in the long run. Or we could take this offer and consider it a successful exit. In the end, we decided to accept the offer with one modification. Jake would be hired as a proper employee in their product development department, not just a consultant. The company agreed, and just like that, my brother-in-law went from struggling to find his place to having his dream job and financial security. My $15,000 investment turned into $60,000 based on my 30% ownership, plus future royalties that would continue to come in for years. The money I had originally saved for Disney World had multiplied many times over. But the real twist came during our celebration dinner after signing the contracts. We were all gathered at our house, Sarah, Jake, the girls, and Sarah's parents. The mood was jubilant as we toasted Jake's success and our family's good fortune. Even Sarah's father, who had been the most skeptical, was beaming with pride. As the evening went on, Sarah's father pulled me aside. He'd had a few glasses of champagne and seemed unusually emotional. "I need to tell you something, Michael," he said, his voice low. "Something I should have told you years ago." He glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then continued. "When Sarah was young, I had an idea for a specialized tool for my construction business. I designed it, built prototypes, everything. But I never had the courage to take it to market. I was too afraid of failure, of risking our financial security." I stared at him, surprised by this revelation. He had always seemed so confident, so certain of everything. "The thing is," he went on, "my design was very similar to Jake's. Different application, but the same basic principle. When he first told us about his interest in inventing things years ago, I shut him down hard. I couldn't bear to see him succeed where I had been too afraid to try." I felt a chill run down my spine as I processed this information. "So, all those times you criticized his ideas?" I began. It was my own fear and regret speaking. he admitted, wiping a tear from his eye. When I saw what you did, how you believed in him enough to invest your own money, I was ashamed. You did what I should have done for him years ago. He gripped my shoulder tightly. Thank you for giving my son the chance I never gave myself. I was speechless. All this time, I had thought Sarah's father was simply being practical, looking out for Jake's best interests by encouraging him to find stable employment. Instead, he had been projecting his own regrets and fears onto his son. Later that evening, I watched as Sarah's father approached Jake. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the emotional embrace that followed, both men wiping away tears. Something long broken had finally begun to heal. It's been a year since that night. Jake is thriving in his new job. He's already developed 2 more products for the company, and his confidence has soared. He's even started dating someone serious for the first time in years. Sarah and I used some of the money to take the girls to Disney World after all, and we've put the rest away for their college fund. The royalty checks, though not massive, provide a nice additional income stream. But the real wealth from this experience wasn't financial. It was the lessons we all learned. Sometimes the people who criticize your dreams the most are fighting their own battles with regret. Trust is fragile, but when broken, it can be rebuilt into something stronger if both parties are willing to work at it. Taking a chance on someone, even when they've let you down, can change not just their life but yours as well. And perhaps most importantly, family isn't just about blood relations or marriage certificates. It's about believing in each other, supporting each other's dreams, and helping each other become the best versions of ourselves. Jake did something wrong when he took my money without asking. There's no question about that. But if he hadn't, we might never have discovered his true potential or healed old family wounds. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as problems. Sometimes betrayal can lead to breakthrough. And sometimes the twist in the story is that there was never a villain, just people trying their best to overcome their fears and find their place in the world. As for me, I've caught the entrepreneurial bug. Jake and I are already discussing another venture together, this time with both of us as equal partners from the start. Whatever happens, I know we'll face it as a stronger, wiser family. Because that's what family does. We fall, we fail, we hurt each other sometimes. But in the end, we lift each other up and keep moving forward together. I'd love to hear your stories of challenges you've faced with family, work, friends, difficult circumstances, or any other things, and how you overcame them. Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of triumph over adversity.